Hello, everybody, and welcome back to TJ's Lego Room. And I am once again excited to bring you guys some pre-recorded videos. The good news is that means we've got some mocks and some instructions coming up. But unfortunately for you, you get tired, TJ, because I do these things really late at night. So you give, and you take, and sometimes that happens, and sometimes I don't get to shave for a few weeks. It happens. It's okay. So let's go ahead and get started on this one. Ta-da! The TIE W. Wait a minute. Don't I already have the TIE W? Haven't I already shown you? Haven't I already shown you guys this? Yes, I have. But if my thumbnail worked out properly, then you guys know that I'm going to be comparing this to my old version of the TIE W that I made a couple years, I think, before this version. And I am really stoked. Looking at the old version and seeing the new version, I am very impressed with how far I came as far as making a really good version of a TIE fighter. So impressed, in fact, that I actually made you guys the instructions for this set. They are available on rebrickable.com. Let's go ahead and do a quick refresher spin around. So we've got the asymmetrical wings from the top and the bottom. We've got the twin ion engines on the back end of the ship on the wings. We've got the rotation mechanism that launches the missiles. That was on the Rebels Inquisitor TIE Fighter, if I remember correctly. That mechanism was introduced, and I really liked it. So much so that I incorporated it in my ship, not just once, but in both versions of the ship. So we've got our quad lasers on each point of the ship, but then we also have our major lasers right on the outside. So this ship is, I believe, my first TIE fighter mock that I ever built. And while I had built some odd versions before, this is the first one that I went in from a design aspect and said, I want to make this shape. And it started out when I found an image on the internet, and I'm going to go ahead and pull it up here, hopefully. And hopefully I can link to the guy's Flickr or the Imgur or wherever I found it. I hope I can link that down below. If not, if you guys could help me out and find it, that'd be great. So I started out with that idea, but I wanted to make it like a legitimate TIE fighter. I didn't want those really thin wings that it had. I wanted it to be a little bit more beefy, a little bit more substantial. And so that's when I originally built this guy. Woo! I apologize for the pictures. I know they're not the best, but unfortunately, that's what I had at the time. I didn't have the greatest camera that I could adjust the white balance and things like that on. I had nothing but an old camera that I had purchased back in 2007, 2000, yeah, 2007, I think, and it could take some pictures, and it was great. And I didn't have a backdrop. You can actually see the seam in the pieces of paper that I used right in the middle there. Ah, memory lane, right? Remembering how far we've been able to come. Production values way higher than it used to be, right? Anyway, I found these pictures on my old Flickr page, which I'm not going to link because I don't keep track of it. My Instagram is definitely where I do better. I'm still not great. I'm working on it, guys. But my old Flickr page, I had images of my old builds, including my original rotating cockpit Y-wing. Okay, but we're not talking about that today, but just a little teaser on what's coming. So let's go ahead and compare these two ships side by side, shall we? I'm going to go ahead and move the new one over, and boom. Hopefully that worked. All right, so some of the key differences you'll notice, we've got the color scheme is different. We've got the first order kind of red, gray, and black theme versus more Imperial gray. And a couple of things to notice right off the bat. The old one did not have the outline, which I think makes the new one pop quite a bit. It also has a lot more open studs. And originally I took that Rebels Inquisitor TIE Fighter and basically just changed a few of the colors out, moved the connection points lower on the ship for the W shape. And in all honesty, I think the W look on this old one is a little bit better in some ways than my new one. The cockpit is a little bit higher on the old one, and my new one, the connection points for the wings are definitely higher on the ship, so kind of lowering that center pod as far as the entire ship goes. But there are a couple of reasons for that. Number one is a stronger connection. Number two, I was able to get it a little bit cleaner look, because I didn't love how on the old one you can see here that they kind of come out the bottom of it, and then you've got this whole bubble that I'm not really doing anything with. So by moving those up just a little bit, I was able to kind of smooth that out and give it a more sturdy connection point visually. So as far as firepower goes, you can see I actually did keep the outside laser cannons on the outside of the wings, but on the inside, instead of the green dots that you see on the new one, I had 2 cannons on either side of the windscreen, and then 2 cannons on the struts going to the wings. They're little flick fire missiles. I'll have another image here in a second to show you a little bit better. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and look at the back side, shall we? So if I flip it around, you can see that the twin ion engines were always on the back end of the ship. I always wanted to have them there. That was part of the design. Since I had that back mechanism rotating back and forth to launch the spring-loaded shooters, I wanted to incorporate that and keep that idea together. So the ion cannons on the outside of the wings were really the main logical place for those things to be. Not only that, but they kind of integrate into the large laser cannon. It makes it kind of look like a big engine energy housing, which was fun. So on the back of the old one, you can see that my Technic beam work was not nearly as streamlined and clean looking as the new version. It's still not 100% perfect, but that's okay for me. Those blue pieces that kind of shine through on the new version, there's not a whole lot of ways to avoid that. You can actually get the pieces that I used on there in black so that it'll streamline a little bit better for you guys. So if you decide to do that when you get the instructions, go ahead and do that. But I used blue because it's more plentiful. I really don't have a lot of the black triple Technic pins, so that's why it ends up being a little bit of blue on mine. You can also see I did reorient the trapezoid. Is it a trapezoid? No, it's still a hexagon. The hexagon shape on the back of the ship. On the old one, I've got it kind of a horizontally aligned. On the new one, I have it vertically aligned. That was because of that whole lore about the First Order and the engines being on the top and bottom instead of on the sides. And so I kind of tried to reminisce about that alignment as well. Let's go ahead and flip to a direct side view of the ship. And this is where it's really going to stand out, because the new one not only looks a lot cleaner, but yeah, it's just better. It's also a lot bigger, is what I was actually going to say. It's not only a lot cleaner and a lot nicer looking, but the new one is also bigger, just overall. But you can see on the old one, I already had that asymmetrical design. I had like the interceptor inspired top part, but then on the bottom part, it's like if you took just the very edge of a regular TIE fighter, just the very edge of the corners, that's kind of where that design came from. But then it's also offset. So you've got the center of the lower half and the attachment point for the upper half being in different locations, but I really liked that offset. A couple other changes on the back engine part. You can see on the old one, I actually used plates to kind of create a housing section, a really close line between the wings and the engine part. It wasn't perfect. Obviously, it's a little cringy to look at for me, especially looking at this new one. Like, oh my goodness, you can see how far I've come as far as building is gone. I was able to get the outside line around the new one, which I honestly, from the new TIE fighters that they came out with that had that outside line, I tried to incorporate that on so many of my vehicles, and it turned out really well. My Phasma TIE fighter turned out really great. This guy turned out good. And even my TIE Bizarro also used the same techniques on plating and tiling a line around the outside of the craft, with outside of the wings, I should say. It worked out great. I was super happy that it turned out that way. Along the cannon area, the center like mechanics part, you can see the new version is much more clean, much more streamlined. I was even able to get the red stripes for the special forces indicators on it, and it just turned out so much better in the new version. But the old one, I got to give it credit. It was my first one. It was my very first fully custom TIE fighter, and I got to say, it started me on this path to where I am now. So we have this guy to thank for the Javelin. So again, I know I'm apologizing a lot for this old one, but holy cow, every time I look at it, it kind of makes me cringe a little bit. All right, so let's look at a couple other views. Here we have the cockpit. Not great. It's very plain, very nondescript. The new one, honestly, isn't that much better. It has a little bit cleaner internals, some of that red detailing that we like to see inside there. But I believe the controls are still identical. So, you can't change everything. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and spin it here and peek inside. Yeah, pretty much the exact same control. Just that droid body control, which was pretty standard on a lot of those things. But the inside of it changed quite a bit to make it feel a little bit more like how I felt it was supposed to be. So then let's go to an isometric view so I can show you a little bit better the cannons. So right from this view, you can see the little flick fire missiles just on the other side of the cockpit. So that was some of the laser cannons that I put on there. I opted to go for the quad laser cannons on the new version because I wanted it to be a little bit more reminiscent of the TIE Interceptor. And I think that worked out really well. I think it fits a little bit better. Now, if I go to this other slightly off isometric view, you can see something. You've got the little cannon emitters on either side of the windscreen, but if you go back behind it, you can see I've got this long stick pointing out the back. I think they're 1x10 or 1x12 curved slopes, and I was super excited when I put those on. I thought they were the coolest thing ever, and when I built the new version, I tried to keep those things for so long. Those were, I think, some of the last things that I cut from the old version, and it kind of broke my heart because that was one of the fun parts, I thought, of the ship, is that you could grab it from behind, off of those things. They weren't that structural, but it gave you a little bit of a handle to fly it around with. The new one, however, you can just grab the ball and fly it around, and it works out great. My son Ben does it all the time. But again, those little spikes coming out the back, those 1x12 spikes, I believe they are, or 1x10 spikes, I thought they looked pretty cool. And unfortunately, the new one, because I moved the engines up, I moved the wings up and the pod down as far as the overall ship, they just didn't fit anymore. Now, the one thing I was able to keep is if you look on the side of that right now, you can see I've got some curved slopes coming from the top hatch down the side. I was able to keep those on one side of the craft, just on the red stripe side. I've got a 2x2 curved slope, kind of to have a little bit of a callback to the original design. While on the other side, I have the traditional antennas for the First Order. So anyway, wow, what a trip, right, guys? What a trip down memory lane. I can't believe how far I've come. And to everybody who's been here since the beginning, thank you so much for hanging out with me. It's been a blast. Again, the instructions for the new version of the ship are on rebrickable.com. I hope you guys are able to run over there and pick up the instructions. It makes a really big difference. I try to stretch out every dollar that people give me in support of this endeavor and support of the Lego Room. I really try to stretch your dollars and make them count. So I hope you know it's going to a good cause. I'm not going out and buying candy bars and stuff with it. It's all going back into the room, into the Lego builds, and trying to make everything better. So anyway, thank you guys so much for being here in TJ's Lego Room. If you stuck out to the end, thank you once again. And I'm going to give you a clue if you stuck out this long. A lot of people have been asking about that giant B-Wing and if I can make instructions for it. Well, next week, you're going to have them. And until then, play well. Bye.